So in this video, we're going to be talking about something called as MVCC. And MVCC stands for multi-version concurrency control. And it's a very important concept. It's a super important concept that even I was kind of, late to realize that, something like this was crucial for as far as writing and reading to a database is concerned, because I was till this time mostly concerned with what happens on the front end and what happens on the server, without actually looking into databases and how how certain race conditions could happen. So let me share my screen and let me walk you through what what I meant. So we're going to talk about MVCC, right? So before we start on MVCC, I want to tell you about some commonly used databases. So some commonly used databases, if we can represent a database like this, might be Postgres, which is of interest to us for this video. And other than that, we have something like commonly used MySQL or MySQL, however you want to pronounce it. And yep, you can have something like Oracle, right? OracleDB, which is also very commonly used. And so I want to talk about MVCC, which is built into Postgres. And let me show you a real life scenario of how MVCC is useful. So for example, if there is a table, okay, so this table may be called as EMP table, right? And this table, consider this table having two rows of data. So one row, okay, let's just say it has one row of data, and this data can be something like emp id, which is 1, right? Emp id, which is 1, and then we have some data related to the employee, because emp stands for employee, and we will say that some data, right? Some data, something like salary is like 50,000, right? So there's this table and we have the employee ID and salary, and let's consider there are two clients, right? Client in the sense someone who wants to access that data, and this, let's label is as transaction 1, right? So what this does is, this is a transaction which is coming into the database, and this is another transaction 2, which is coming in the database. And when we consider databases like MySQL and Oracle, what happens is, so for example, transaction 1 provides an update statement, right? So for example, I want to update the salary, okay? So here I will say update. I want to update the salary, update to 100K, right? So once this transaction is happening, and another person, say someone from the HR department, wants to access this salary, right? This record will not be accessible until transaction 1 is committed. So basically there is this locking mechanism that happens for MySQL and Oracle databases, whereby a transaction cannot perform the read statement until and unless another transaction, say for example, the first transaction that came in was the update transaction, and until and unless that transaction is committed or aborted, whichever happens, until and unless that happens, transaction 2 will not be allowed to process on that table. Okay, so this is termed as locking, and locking is actually a very useful scenario where if this was not allowed to be locked, right, this data read, right, would be useless, because it would get the old data, right? So that is one scenario. And what to counter this scenario, right, what we have in Postgres is something called MVCC. So MVCC, right, MVCC is multi-version concurrency control. And for Postgres, the scenario, how this works is, for example, if you have the transaction update transaction is going to 100K, and transaction 2 wants to read, this will not be locked in MVCC. and you can perform the read. So this read will perform and this read will be getting as 50k, right? And this 50k will be there until and unless this is not committed. So once this is committed, right, once this is committed, what happens in MVCC is that Postgres maintains a version of the earlier data as v0, okay, and v1 is the latest data. So what the transaction 3, if it happens, like transaction 3 wants to read the data, this transaction 3 will always refer to the latest data, right? So what transaction 3 will be getting is v1, which points to 100k, right? So basically Postgres maintains a copy of, or I would say version of, all the previous datas, you know, all the previous values, the history or the versions of values in a separate table, right? You could, so there are multiple storage options for storing versions, which may be termed as time travel kind of mechanism, and there is another you know, we don't need to get into all that, but we'll be doing once we get into the hands-on of this particular concept. So this is the whole concept of MVCC. So while the transaction 1 is happening for transaction 1 on this table, transaction 2 can also happen in parallel. So Postgres allows connections to be read. So there is no locking mechanism in Postgres, and once the transaction 1 is committed, the next transaction will point to the latest data inside of that particular entry, and it will get the latest data, latest value. So this is kind of like a high level of what MVCC architecture is, and in the next video we will be going into the hands-on of how we can prevent race conditions using Node.js and PostgreSQL. And yep, I hope this was a good video. See you guys in the next one. Peace.